think it's broken. Well, good morning and welcome to our March meeting of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. Do we have any citizens to be heard this morning? If not, I would have a motion to approve our minutes of our board meeting of February 3rd.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? And also approval of our minutes of the Joint Parking and Marketing Committee meeting of February 6th. Any?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Thank you. Consent docket. We've only got 3 items on the consent docket. Would any of the trustees like any discussion on those items? If not, then I'd have a motion to approve the consent docket.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. All right, our items for individual consideration. Item A is approval of a contract for professional services with Wayne Simpson. I'll let Jason expand on that just a moment.
Sure. So, as many of you are familiar with Wayne Simpson, our longtime manager of scheduling with Cotpa. He recently retired effective February 24th, and so we certainly congratulate Mr. Simpson on his retirement. As you know, Wayne provided basically our day-to-day scheduling activities, was involved in a lot of special projects, particularly the route realignment that we did a couple of years ago. And one of the main things that he helps us with each year is basically twice a year we take a look at all of our schedules for the bus system. We look at all of our service hours and we divide those service hours up into shifts for bus operators to basically bid on. And so we're contractually obligated to do that twice a year, and we certainly want to continue to do that because it gives employees an opportunity to basically kind of change their work assignment if they choose to do so. So that process in particular happens so infrequently, although we feel good about the transition and the training we've done ahead of time to ensure successful succession planning. Because of that exercise in particular happening so infrequently, we thought it would be in the best interest of the trust to enter into this agreement so that Wayne can come back and assist us during at least the next sign up this summer. So with approval of this agreement, we'll be able to retain Mr. Simpson's services. You can see the estimated cost on an annual basis is about $10,000.
All right. Any questions? If not, do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Item B is to authorize the administrator to execute final plans and bidding documents for our transit center exterior remodel, and we heard from the architect last month about some of the ideas and what they're going to do. So I think we're about ready for Jason to send that out to bid, but if you have anything to say about it, then.
That's correct. With approval of this item, we plan to release the bid documents and advertise for bids on March 8th. So we're excited to get started on the project. We anticipate bringing a contract back to the board April, surely no later than May. And work will commence this summer and hopefully be finished up by the end of the summer or early fall. So with approval of this item, we'll make sure we get those bids advertised.
I have a motion to approve. All in favor? Opposed? Item C, our last item, is adoption of a resolution for TAP grant funds to help with our Spokies bike share program. And Jason, if you'd just like to comment on that a minute.
Yeah, this is the second opportunity we've had to apply for TAP grant or Transportation Alternatives Program funds. This grant program is administered by ACOG. And if you'll recall, a couple of years ago we were successful in a small grant application to help us make some bus stop improvements. And then with this grant application, we're focusing on our Spokies bike share system. And with approval of, if we were to be awarded this grant, this would allow us to add 2 stations to the existing network of 8 stations. You'll notice the cost referenced in the memo is $20,000. That would be the local match portion The entire project for 2 stations would cost closer to around $100,000. That's for stations and bikes. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is the resolution also authorizes staff to add to the number of stations in the grant application should we be able to find a local business or other organization willing to provide local match. So from time to time, we've been approached by businesses or organizations about, hey, can we put a Spokey station here? We haven't had the resources to be able to do that. Oftentimes, the initial buy-in is cost prohibitive for those organizations, but when they're just looking at the local match, it may be much more feasible. So we're going to attempt to contact some different organizations and businesses to help with that local match, and we'll adjust the grant application accordingly.
But this local match is not from private business?
No, the local match, the $20,000 referenced on the memo, will come from our reserves,
Okay.
Cotpa reserves.
Jason, if we did have a local business serve as the sponsor for one of these locations, would we allow them to provide some type of recognition or not advertising of their business associated with that Spokey stop?
Yes, we would want to have some of those discussions. I think, primarily if we were looking at just the minimum match amount for a station, I think some of that would be, limited. But if they certainly wanted to look at it from a sponsorship standpoint, we would do like we've done in the past and added the company logo or whatever to some of our materials and bikes. So. And I know Jeannie has some ideas of different levels of sponsorship, and we'd be glad to talk to businesses and engage them in that conversation.
Thank you.
Is Blue Cross still the major sponsor again this year?
They still are our major sponsor. They have, however, reduced their sponsorship some, and we'll actually look at that when we get to our financial reports.
Okay, all right. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve item C? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next item is ratification and claims and payroll for January 31st through February 22nd. Unless there's any questions by any of the trustees, I'd have a motion to ratify our claims and payroll.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Our financial reports. Jason, we've got the budget to actual for the 7 months and the interim financial, but I don't know, there's a lot in the interim financial, but probably a few items on the 7 months you might like to comment on.
Right. You'll notice the financial reports in your packet do include 3 different reports. The budget to actual we review each month, the interim financial that we receive on a quarterly basis prepared by the city's accounting department. Just as a reminder, the interim financial really provides a comparison of where we're at in the current year versus the previous year. The other report that is included is the interim pension report, and that report has been provided and received by the pension committee during our meeting on February 21st. So, but I'll focus my comments primarily on the budget to actual, 7 months ending January 31st. It's the most current information, and begin on page 2 looking at our transportation operations. So, if you'll turn to page 2, I'd start by just looking at the total operating revenues. This is the bottom line under the operating revenues section. And you'll notice that the variance through 7 months is positive $89,467. So we're essentially on budget in terms of revenues with what we had projected. And I mention that because when we met last month and we were looking at the December financial, we were actually discussing about $1 million deficit in revenues versus, actual revenues versus budgeted revenues. And at that time, I had discussed the timing of the federal grant and the fact that the federal grant revenue was lower than what we had expected because we hadn't received our next grant. We hadn't had it approved by the FTA and sought the reimbursement. So with this financial that you have in front of you, you'll notice that the federal grant revenue has recovered. We've actually been approved for that grant. We've sought our reimbursements. We've received them. and now we're actually $144,000 over what we had expected in terms of federal grant revenue. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about that because that is such a huge variance from month to month, but pleased to report that we're essentially back on track and where we thought we would be through 7 months of the fiscal year in terms of revenue. Looking at operating expenditures, again, very similar to what we looked at last month. We continue to see savings in personal services, the cost for personnel. Again, that's driven primarily by vacancies that we had at the beginning of the fiscal year. And again, this is an area where we don't necessarily look forward to having savings because it generally means we're understaffed. But we have done a good job of filling some vacancies in the second half of the fiscal year. And you'll notice that savings will probably decline as we get closer and closer to the end of the fiscal year. In fact, it's declined since our December financial sum.
Question though, Jason, when you do the budget and those vacancies, is that salaries in the budget even though the position's vacant?
That's exactly right. We budget assuming all the positions are filled. So then looking at the other expenditure categories, we are over on the other services and fees. That overage is offset by some savings in the supplies and fuel line. And then if you look at the total operating income, you'll see that the actual expenditures exceed revenues received by about $166,000 through 7 months of the fiscal year. But I would also direct your attention back to the revenue section. And if you look at the subsidy we received from the state, we haven't received any of that yet through January. So once those funds come in, we'll be back to the positive on revenues versus expenditures. Moving on to the parking operations on the next page. Again, not a lot of change from the previous month. Looking at our total operating revenues, you'll see we're at about $167,000 less than what we had expected, or about 97% of our budget. You can see the variance there in our monthly contract revenue and our event revenue. Looking at our operating expenditures, we do continue to remain under budget on our operating expenditures. When you look at total operating revenues versus total operating expenditures, we're to the good of $2.2 million through the first 7 months of the fiscal year, and that does include payments for our debt service. And then looking at the river cruises operation on the next page, won't spend a lot of time on this. It's virtually unchanged from last month. Again, we had a really good year in our river operations. We finished over budget on revenues, under budget on expenditures, and it really puts us in a really, in my mind, a good position to start our season here later this spring. And then I will have a couple of comments on Spokies on the next page. This is page 5. I did want to point out that you'll notice the bike share sponsorship revenue is about $40,000 under budget. We've received $10,000 year to date. And at this point, we're planning on that probably being the extent of sponsorship that we get this year. So with that said, that's going to put us under budget on our revenues. We do, however, have a plan to mitigate that revenue shortfall. And basically what we'll do is, one, we'll continue to manage the expenditures to the best of our ability to come in under budget. You'll notice through 7 months we are under budget on our expenditures for our services and fees category. That's our contract with Bicycle Transit Systems. And then the other line under the operating expenditures, the payment to the Transit Cash Fund, that's basically a reimbursement for the personnel costs associated with managing the program. In order to balance that budget and account for that anticipated revenue shortfall, we will probably hold off on some or all of that payment back to the cash fund. So we'll keep you posted on that as we move forward, but we're confident we can manage that within our existing budget. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Well, I guess we can have a motion to receive that financial report before you get into the other two. So do I have a motion to receive item A?
Move the item.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. All right. I don't know if you have any particular on the interim financial and the pension report, but you might make mention on the pension report. where we're doing on funding. But
Yeah, I could direct you to the first page on the interim pension. And really, it's lots of information in the report, but you'll notice the fourth bullet under the financial summary. That will give you the change in the funded ratio. I know that's certainly been an item of discussion and importance for the trustees to increase our funded ratio, and we're at 81.8%, so just under 82% on our funding ratio based on the last actuarial report.
all right. Any questions? If not, I'd have a motion to approve item B and C.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. All right, our program reports. Our first will be the streetcar report. And
Good morning. How's everyone? Here to give you a quick update of the streetcar for the month of February. We'll start with operations. So the negotiation team, again, Embark, Shields, Oblet, Johnson's, and Jenkins, including the municipal counselor's office, we're holding regularly scheduled negotiation meetings. We have weekly conference calls, and we've had 2 in-face meetings in February, February 7th and February 14th. Embark continues to reach out to other streetcar service providers, including the state oversight authorities. We hold biweekly meetings with ODOT. Embark Maps and Public Works met with ODOT to help coordinate the construction of the Oklahoma City Boulevard and making sure that the streetcar project can move forward and be able to work within ODOT's right-of-way. And then also, staff presented the streetcar communications plan to the Cotpa Marketing Committee on February 22nd, or February 6th, and then also to the streetcar subcommittee on February 22nd. Moving on to the mainline track design, I think I saw several of you at the groundbreaking on February 7th. You can see from the picture it was one of the most attended groundbreakings of MAPS 3 history. And also, if you were there, I think everyone could tell it was, very positive, and everyone was enthusiastic and energized for the project. Construction-wise, utility relocation and track slab construction continues in Bricktown. And also, if you've been up around the roundabout on Northwest 10th, ONG has started some of their gas line relocations, looking at doing a bore from around Hudson to Robinson to get those out of the track slab conflict areas. A couple more pictures from the groundbreaking. The top left picture there is city council members, MAPS 3 advisory board and subcommittee members. The bottom left there is a picture of the Herzog Stacy Whitbeck team. If you're ever out on site and you want to talk to somebody that knows what they're talking about, the gentleman in the middle there, that's Aaron Adams. He's the project manager. And then the guy that's kind of hiding behind the woman on the right there, that's Bill Larrabee. He's the site superintendent. He's kind of over the entire thing. Then on the right there is a picture of Mr. McDaniel holding up a picture of the concrete thing that we plan to start placing around downtown, midtown, Bricktown, locating the locations of the future stops. Next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about how all the groups are working together to try to make this project the best that it can be. We hold weekly construction meetings. That's what the picture here is showing. Every week on Tuesday at 8:30, we have a meeting. It includes MAPS, Jacobs, the design team, Herzog Stacy Whitbeck, field services, our testing department, and these meetings usually last an hour to possibly 2 hours, depending on how deep in the weeds we go. We also have weekly franchise utility and public utility meetings, meeting with ONG, Cox, AT&T, all of those guys, making sure that everyone's on the same page and coordinating locations of possible moves. Also, every Wednesday at 10:30, we meet with the traffic department, planning for the future, planning for events, making sure that the streetcar construction can work around events, so we're not closing adjoining streets, so that you don't have to go 3 blocks to get around construction. We also meet with Drew, special event coordination, to make sure that we can maintain special events to the best of our ability during construction, and also planning for future events once streetcar begins operation. And then again, we hold biweekly meetings with ODOT for the State Oversight Authority coordination. Next picture, so what we do to make sure that we stay out in front of construction. The Jacobs team, led by Jack Jay, for the in-the-field services, they go out and they're 3 to 4 weeks ahead of where construction is actually going to come through. So they go out, and like in this picture here, along Sheridan, they were going through and spotting all the OCS foundations. And we spotted a couple of locations where there was some conflict. So we gathered the group together. We all went out on site, including Jacobs' team. We didn't fly in, but Mark Dorn from Seattle and then Doug Smith from Texas came in town, and we got everyone together so we can make a decision, then keep construction moving forward. Next picture here is showing how we communicate with property and business owners. If you've been down Joe Carter, you've noticed that there's a lane closed, so we maintain northbound traffic there. But one of the interesting things that Herzog Stacy Whitbeck has done is that, and I've been around a lot of construction, so you don't see this that often, is they go and meet with the property owners and business owners, and they determine, what's the best way to maintain access to your building. And like in this picture here, they've laid down steel plates so we can maintain access to the ballpark, and also the one further to the north there, that was so that they can maintain delivery along Flaming Lips Alley.
Just out of curiosity, I drove by there this weekend to look at it, and it is really pretty deep in the pavement. Mm-hmm. The rail's only, but can you explain that?
Yeah, so the track slab is 12 inches thick. It's all concrete, and then they rebuild
the slab beneath the track is 12. I see.
Yeah, it's not your standard 6 or 8 inch concrete for roadways.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
Thick. And what's interesting about the concrete slab, one of the reasons why it's 12 inches thick with all the reinforcing, is it's able to bridge a 10-foot gap underneath it. So if utility work needs to come in the future and do a utility bore underneath the track slab, they can span 10 foot underneath the track slab before they need to start putting shoring up.
Okay.
And that's for future access also. Okay, and then this next slide here, Kristen Wilson with ADG, she sends out weekly traffic reports. You're able to sign up on those through the Maps 3 website, or if you'd like, you can give me your email addresses and I'll sign you up so that you get those weekly updates. But she sends out maps that show lane closures and redirects. And so I put together this map that shows all the construction that's going on in Bricktown and some of the lane closures. So periodically on Sheridan, the two eastbound lanes will be closed, and so they take the two lanes on the north and they switch them up so that you can maintain east-westbound traffic. On Joe Carter there, the southbound lane's closed for track slab construction, but we maintain the north lane there. And then also on Reno, on the streetcar line, the north lane is closed for utility relocation and also for future platform construction. So we've maintained one westbound lane there, and then the two eastbound lanes on Reno remain open. Moving along for the storage and maintenance facility, I'm sure if you've driven by, you've seen quite a bit of progress there. They're starting to put the structural steel up. All the major concrete placements are in place, and we are still holding to our October 14th, 2017 completion date. And I've shown this slide several times before, just kind of showing where things are in the building. But now that you start seeing some of the steel going up, it starts to make more sense. So to the left there is the office area. Moving to the south or to the right, you've got your maintenance office area, the service inspection bay, and then closest to the viewer is the parts storage area. And then moving further to the south or to the right, you've got your heavy maintenance bay, covered wash bay, and covered storage that allows us to store the 6 streetcars under storage. Next couple of slides, what I did is I took some pictures of the current status and compared them to the rendering. So this here is our main rendering looking to the southeast, and then the bottom slide there just kind of shows current progress. This next slide is looking directly south, looking directly at the front of the building. It's not the best picture on the bottom. Some of the sun kind of washes out some of the picture, but you get a pretty good idea. The main entry is kind of off to the right there. They call that the jewel box. It's all glass and entryway there. And then also in the rendering, you can see the canopy there is red. That kind of ties it back into the Union Station, tying some of the color in. Then I think this has been mentioned before, but something that's pretty interesting is on the front of the building, it's got that long flat wall there. It's going to be made out of limestone. So the quarry that did the limestone for Union Station went out of business, I think it was back in the 50s or 60s, and then in the past couple of years has come back online. And so that's where we're going to be getting our limestone for this building, and it's a direct match to the Union Station building. Next slide here is looking west. This is looking directly at the entry into the service bays. And the photo down at the bottom there shows the progress. Since this photo, they've actually connected the center section there. They've got the roof beams in place, and we hope to start seeing some exterior finishes going soon. Vehicle procurement. So we're still on track. Everything's looking great. Vehicle number 1 is completely in final assembly. We're looking to start painting here in the next few weeks. Vehicle number 2, car A, they've started skinning the center car. They're working on the final framing, and then also car B, they're working on the final framing. Vehicle number 3, it's in, all 3 sections are in framing. And then vehicle number 4 has just come online with the framing of the center car. And then I've mentioned this last time, but as cars come online, they'll go from shaded out to in color so we can keep track of them a little better. And then also vehicle number 7 was approved at the subcommittee this past couple weeks ago. So I'll work on getting the slide updated so that we can show car 7. But just to kind of give you an idea when we plan for car 7 to come and get completed, it will fall in line after Milwaukee, so we're looking at receiving car 7 around August of 2018.
Excuse me, why is the vehicle number 1 has the notation of state fair car?
Right, so the mayor's requested that one of the vehicles be shown at this year's state fair.
Oh.
And so we wanted to make sure that the Redbud car was the one that goes to the state fair. And so vehicle number 1, it'll be completed first, stored, and then brought to the state fair a few weeks before the fairgrounds opens. Last slide here is rail procurement. So all the rail is on site, minus the special track work. If you've been down to 10th Street lately, you've seen that all the small sections of rail have been welded into the 350-foot lengths. The picture here shows kind of the process. So the Holland has this welding rig, and what it's got the welding unit and generators, and it's got this long boom arm that comes down, and it clamps them to the rails, pulls them together, heats them up with electricity, and then it does a weld. The welding takes about maybe 3 to 4 minutes, and then they just drag it down the street and hook on another one and weld them together. So they've moved the welding operations up to the Dolisi Yard up around 14th and Broadway, and they're moving quickly, and we hope to get all the welding completed here in the next couple weeks. Special track work, we expect our first shipment in April of 2017. Our second shipment, we're expecting possibly in July of 2017. We've been communicating with Voslo, the distributor for it. There is a potential that is going to slide in the future, but we're working with them to do everything that we can to maintain schedule with Voslo. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, many questions? Good report. I appreciate being brought up to date, and I know all the trustees do too. Thank you.
Oh, if I may, at City Council meeting, we approved an agenda item to ask the consultants to look at autonomous type streetcars. So just to bring everybody up to date. Well, driverless, yeah.
And you can walk along in front of it to separate traffic, and I mean, David.
I asked the mayor about that, and he says many tests, maybe not on streetcars, but with other autonomous vehicles, they tend to be more reactive in case something or somebody were to get in the way of traffic, they're quicker to respond.
If you watch the commercials these days, the cars stop themselves. You almost can't get in an accident with them if it's your car. So it's kind of an interesting concept.
Well, I think we'll study that further then, do. All right. Long-range plan? Good morning.
Sure, good morning. Today I'm not going to focus on the bullets of the long-range plan. Instead, I'm going to cover two basically special topics that we've been working on for a few months. One is about the benefit cost analysis that the board recently hired a firm to conduct for us. It's a benefit cost analysis, or BCA, for a potential bus rapid transit project that would go from downtown, in essence, out Classen and then out the Northwest Expressway. The second topic, which we'll cover kind of quickly at the end, will be a little update on those transit-oriented development, or TOD, workshops from the summer. The Cotpa 2030 long-range plan, fixed guideway long-range plan, shows a series of green lines on this map, and those are the bus rapid transit lines that are in that plan. And the one that you see that kind of emanates from the center and goes out and then again to the northwest, that's the line that we're really talking about today. So the idea is that really BRT would connect downtown and northwest Oklahoma City, at least out as far as Meridian and the Northwest Expressway, probably further, and that it would actually have a way of connecting in with streetcar. This idea of streetcar connecting with buses is not a new idea. As you know, the platforms for streetcar are also designed to accommodate buses with a roll-on, roll-off type of movement for passengers. And in this particular case, we've asked these consultants to look at stop number 14 out at just north of St. Anthony Hospital as one of the places where it would cross a streetcar line, but it would also do so at the downtown transit center. And so, this idea of feeder bus routes, which is kind of what this would be, streetcar feeding BRT, BRT feeding streetcar, is kind of comparable to the idea of the feeder bus routes that were recommended in the Tiger planning, such as a loop that might go to the Health Science Center that's a bus when streetcar operates, or a bus loop that would go out to, say, the Plaza District when streetcar would first operate. Well, okay. Bus rapid transit. It's really become popular across America. A lot of cities larger than us have already installed lines. And this is about 30 cities where there's either a BRT line being planned or already funded or basically under construction. Kind of interesting that they've left off Tulsa, which has 3 in the planning and already funded works, and they leave off San Antonio and Kansas City, even though those are pretty recent ones. So, to give you a little glimpse, gives you a little sense of what bus rapid transit might be like. Kind of different than what our bus system is before. And we're going to come back to this slide in a minute, but it's different in quite a number of ways than our bus service. And I should mention that the cost to build bus rapid transit really is just a fraction of what it costs to build the comparable distance or length of streetcar. But when we think about bus rapid transit, we think about things like the service, the type of platform, the type of vehicles. In this case, the service would be a lot more frequent, and it would be branded. Wouldn't be called the Route 45 or the 66. It would have a name, something that really kind of communicates the rapid transit different nature of it. More frequent type of service. Our buses today, bus routes are every half hour. Maybe it's 12 to 15 minutes more like streetcar. Then there's a look of the vehicles. This idea of a vehicle that's about 60 foot long, perhaps about the length of streetcar, has a more sleek, longer look to it, more futuristic look. And then even the platforms, the places where people get on and off, are considerably more substantial than what we really have today with our existing buses. And they have a number of amenities, and every one of them would really need some type of a safe crossing so that a person could get to the station on the other side. Because people getting off here need to probably get back on across the street when they return. Fewer stops, but not like an express bus, that might stop only 3 or 4 times over a course of 15 miles. These might stop perhaps every mile in some places, a little more frequent in others. And it can run in mixed traffic, but it could also be in a special lane, or kind of a mixture along a given route. There's a lot of things about bus rapid transit that help save time. One is the idea of the off-board fare collection, where people basically pay for their tickets at the platform before they get on. Other things relate to traffic signal priority and something we call Q-jump lanes and other sorts of technology. Well, this next slide, I don't really expect you to try to read it. What I'm hoping is you'll kind of later on maybe download the presentation or look more closely, but it's a lot of the same things I've just mentioned to you by speaking, so this little cartoon graph is kind of interesting to look at. You know, it's not a new idea. We've talked to a lot of folks about bus rapid transit. About 40 or 50 Oklahoma City leaders went to San Antonio a few years ago, and we were able to get VIA to bring out one of their vehicles and also talk about the BRT system, the Primo, in San Antonio. And this one shows things like the station platforms, how it accommodates bicycles and pedestrians. Okay, back to the slide you saw a moment ago. You know, this gives you a little sense of bus rapid transit. Like in the upper left slide, you get that sense of how BRT in places might actually operate in its own guideway, its own special lanes. And as you can kind of tell, it looks pretty futuristic. It's kind of not what you'd normally expect. Lanes that are just for buses. The bottom left, it shows that idea of the red lane that's sort of a buses and right turn only type of lane. And that graphic also shows the intermodal aspect, cyclists, pedestrians, platforms with ramps, and a whole lot of things that represent a more basic level of BRT service. And then this slide on the bottom right still looks like some kind of a rail stop and rail vehicle at a station, but bus rapid transit again. Might think of BRT as streetcar light. The green slide at the top is Eugene, Oregon, where Oregon University is. The bottom one is the Cleveland Healthline BRT, which has proven pretty successful. So let's think a little bit about Oklahoma City. You all remember the work that you authorized the OU Institute for Quality Communities to do, where they looked at 7 or 8 different locations, and this was one of the graphics that came out of it. So the idea is that, you know, we really can't stop a bus on the 6 lanes of Northwest Expressway safely, so you create this station location where the bus pulls into its own lane. People have a safer crossing that's designed in to get across the 6 lanes, and basically the bus works in conjunction with the traffic signal so that in sort of a primitive form of a Q-jump lane, it can jump out there before the rest of the cars because it gets the green light maybe 2 seconds before the rest of the cars. So that would be like Northwest Expressway by Valiance Bank at Blackwelder. It's kind of a concept. There's a lot more challenging locations, like what would you do at Integris Hospital out at Independence and Northwest Expressway, out in there by by that Starbucks. This is how that looks today. Many lanes of traffic, a lot of traffic movements to contend with. And then if you were to look at Integris from the north, maybe it looks something kind of like this, where you have the idea of the 2-stage pedestrian crossing, again, that special lane for the buses and the passengers so they can be safe. And it kind of gives you an idea of, okay, maybe that's how that works. Okay, well, I'm going to shift over to talk a little bit about this idea of this Northwest BRT concept and how we've got that firm working on a benefit cost analysis, a BCA. Basically, a BCA is always required if the city wants to apply for a Tiger Grant application of any amount. You have to have the BCA, but even if you and other leaders decided not to, at least we have this BCA as a great bit of information, a lot of information about benefits that have been quantified and monetized, and it also would be based on the ridership estimates that would come out of it. So, you know, a lot of those benefits have to do with travel time savings, with the convenience for passengers, with the idea of savings of fuel, less pollution, et cetera. Okay, assumptions that were being used. The idea is that you'd have some type of a route that would run along Classen and the Northwest Expressway every 12 to 15 minutes, about like a streetcar would. But the idea is that when it would get to what might be the end, or at least it's what we're having the model for now, Meridian and Northwest Expressway, another route would feed it, a new route that we don't have today. One that would pass by a couple more park and ride lots and get out to about Council Northwest Expressway, but then find its way a little further north. So as you can kind of see, BRT doesn't stand alone. It's the idea that it works in conjunction with a lot of other bus routes. And like the bottom bullet shows, not really to think about it as just a commuter route to and from downtown, but something that kind of supports life along the Northwest Expressway in Classen. Well, let's see. With that, really, just a couple of quick slides about an update regarding transit-oriented development. As you remember, last summer, Smart Growth America came to town, did those great TOD workshops. They produced a findings report, and we'd be glad to provide that report to you if you'd like. And you know, we know it's a pretty interesting topic because Leadership Oklahoma City had a luncheon at the Petroleum Club about a month ago. 150 people showed up to hear about mapping development along streetcar, which is basically transit-oriented development around streetcar. So, you know, there were a lot of findings. Some of them had to do with this prospect of some type of northwest rapid transit corridor, because we'd asked them to. But the three overarching bullets are things like like this first one, about basically trying to foster a cross-sector collaboration. BRT's not just about us. I mean, you know, the park and ride a lot of today perhaps becomes more than that later. But, you know, a lot of other organizations, the Alliance for Economic Development, Oklahoma City Planning, and a lot of different private business owners and people that own large parking lots, they'd have a stake in something like this. So try to foster that collaboration. Neighborhoods have a big stake as well. Streetcar is going to be the first taste of transit-oriented development, and obviously TOD is really a great opportunity to boost ridership and livability. And then I guess finally, you know, the city is getting ready, really they've started, to the recodification of the zoning ordinance and subdivision codes. And this rewrite, which will take a couple of years to do, they're already looking at trying to incorporate different types of TOD features with that. So, you know, with that, that was a lot of slides in just a few minutes. I hope you'll be interested in trying to download that, but I'm glad to try to answer any questions.
Recently, in the last couple of weeks, there was an article in the paper about the Regional Transit Authority and all the surrounding communities. But refresh my memory. I mean, was it voting on the fund? I can't remember what was in the article.
Well, Jason probably give you a better explanation on that, but in relation to this BCA, this particular route would pass through War Acres for about a mile between Meridian and MacArthur. And so some type of, you know, multi-jurisdictional relationship really is very, very important. But Jason, you might want to cover that, I guess.
Sure. So the Regional Transit Authority Task Force continues to meet on a regular basis, once a month generally. As you know, that task force is chaired by our mayor, Mick Cornett. And the topics for last month's meeting were really just discussing, one, the idea of doing some polling and just kind of getting a feel for the community and how supportive they are of regional transit. And then really the second piece that we discussed was, you know, opportunities to bring in consultants to just help us take the organization of, you know, the RTA, in other words, how the RTA would be formed, how to take that forward. So we continue to meet on a regular basis, and those are really the two main topics we've been discussing lately.
All right.
Chris, Larry, just for clarification purposes, would the BRT vehicles be limited to the same speed limit that other vehicles are on the streets?
Yes, really it would, because it would operate in mixed traffic for the most part, so yes.
But they still could be somewhat assisted through coordination of the computerized traffic signals that the city now has operating.
They could. Just as with streetcar, we're looking at this prospect of traffic signal priority, TSP, that requires sensors on the bus, sensors on some of the signals. Something similar could be done. And then this idea that in some cases that the bus has its own special lane at what would otherwise be a busy intersection.
Right.
It's a lane at the far right-hand side. And it kind of gets to move up to, and maybe it's in conjunction with a stop. It's there, and it gets its green light again just a couple of seconds before the other vehicles so that it's already in traffic.
Yeah.
Isn't in their way, but the cars aren't in its way.
And you indicated that while the initial route may take them as far as Meridian, maybe MacArthur, maybe Council on Northwest Expressway, but conceivably it could connect somehow to the Turnpike as well, if not the BRT, but some secondary bus route to where people could come from a larger distance via the Turnpike somehow. and then connect to the BRT to get finally to the downtown area.
Yes, and good point, yeah. We are considering trying to have these same consultants do a second run of a benefit cost analysis for a BRT line that would go all the way to Council and Northwest Expressway, okay? And then that feeder becomes a little shorter than it would have been. But even so, that feeder route, the idea is that it would meet not every BRT, because it wouldn't be as frequent,
Right.
but about every half hour, that feeder line would meet so that a person would feel like they had something very close to a single-seat ride from Northwest Expressway and Council.
That's great. Now, this is a request for your personal opinion. What do you think the earliest date would be that this could become a reality?
You know, I can't really venture an opinion on that because it really comes down to funding of how you build it and how you operate it. We do know that BRT projects can be designed and put in place rather quickly because, you know, but when we say quickly, we are talking still some years.
I do believe that's something we could have pretty quickly, just conceptually. Like if we had let's just say, for example, we had the funding, then how long does it take to get there and begin revenue operations? We're actually working through a contracting process now with an on-call planning consultant that could probably help us move that forward if that was a desire to just look at a timeline maybe a little earlier rather than later.
So, Jason, when you say funding, is it like a one-time cost, or do you mean operational funding?
Well, it's really both of the pieces. You know, the capital investment to construct everything that, you know, Larry's described as part of what makes BRT, but then the ongoing operations.
Well, couldn't Laura and Craig insert that into the GO bond issue as far as the initial cost?
I mean, I guess that's a possibility. We've been working more towards preparing the project for like a Tiger grant or another FTA.
So we wouldn't need to use our own money.
That would be our first. Yeah, that's our first. That's our first option.
Well, let's take that.
That's our first option. But we may come back. But that's our first option.
And I do think, just to add, I do think that all of this work that Larry and Jason are doing on preparing this gives us an advantage in the federal grant process because they do like projects that are a little bit further down the line. We've been able to use federal funding so far to get us moved in this direction. And I think that when you ask how long it will take, we'll have a leg up in being essentially that shovel ready that everybody likes to talk about if we keep moving on this path. So those things all contribute, I think, to that. Now, there'll be some federal matching, I'm sure, even if we get a Tiger grant.
There would be, you know, and really, Tiger, in a way, it's easier for a city like ours to compete for a Tiger grant than it ever would be for small starts or very small starts. Because a lot of times with Tiger, you might apply for $5 or $8 or $15 million, you know, so it's kind of more in the scale of doing something. And there's reason to think Tiger's going to be out there. But still, if you want to really compete, not only do you have to have a good project, but usually you have to overmatch it. And, you know, even though 20% is the minimum match, the city's never proposed that small an amount. And then, you know, once built, you still have to have a way to operate it. But I guess the thing I didn't point out is we're having them model it as if it was 5 buses, with the idea that you have maybe a 12 to 14-minute frequency. But you'd need 6 buses, and then the feeder, that's sort of a whole different subject, but it's all scalable, you know, that, yeah, you might very well just do the BRT and not get around to the feeder bus for a while.
Okay, so let's say that we would want to propose we contributing 30% versus 20% of the original cost. How much are you talking about roughly? Like 10 million or 5 million?
Well, in terms of total cost, more than that. And basically, we're trying to get a little bit more consultant expertise on what the capital cost might be, because BRT can range pretty widely. And so hopefully, well, by the time we would come back in, say, May or June to report on the findings of all this, we would have those types of planning level cost estimates ready for you.
Well, see, that would still give us time to insert it in the GO bond, or if there was a subsequent MAPS program for the capital cost. So is funding the only potential, I hate to use this term, roadblock to implementing BRT? Is that you don't see zoning or anything else being a problem, do you?
No, not zoning. We've already had some conversations with ODOT because they really control part of the right-of-way. There's always a need for some type of an environmental study. Even though it's very urban, you have to do that for federal money. A lot of it is about education of the public, of the community, to help them see that, maybe this is a good option, as a good way to get out several miles beyond the downtown with some type of high-capacity transit. So environmental, ODOT, I don't see that as an issue. A lot of it's going to be about the community. Will they embrace an idea like this?
I see. Well, thank you.
Larry, in the consultant's work, has there been any projection on ridership or usage?
They're going to do that, and we're actually having them do it using a method that we know the federal government finds credible. And so, just like you, we're really looking forward to finding out what is that, because that's a lot of what, that's really one of the key benefits that you've got to put, I guess, in essence, as the as the numerator over the cost, So, yeah.
So, but we don't have that yet. I mean, that's part of the future consultant.
Should have that in a couple of months, yes.
Okay.
One final question. If you were to look at the congestion that I encounter, for example, from far southwest Oklahoma City to get to the downtown area using I-44 that eventually feeds to I-40, I think that would demonstrate a need for some other form of transportation instead of individual vehicles, cars, Does that kind of issue come into the analysis? Because I know a lot of the main arteries, whether it's Broadway Extension or 235, I guess, or I-35, I-40, I-44, they all get very congested, in rush hour. And it seems to keep extending what rush hour means. Like, now it starts before 7 a.m. and extends, I don't know how late, and then in the afternoon it begins to start 3:30 or 4 and extends 6:30. So those are the kinds of issues that I think we need some kind of answer to, because that's only going to it's only going to get worse, the congestion, and I don't know of any viable plan to try to expand our major highways. Nobody has the money. So this would be a possible solution, in my opinion. Anyway.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and the idea of the one northwest, that would be the idea that maybe that's the best corridor to start with. There are other sectors of the community that really, could perhaps use that, and so often it's really the good bus project that eventually sets the stage for a rail project.
David, the current administration in Washington says we're going to have money for the infrastructure. So
I'm encouraged.
I believe that. I think the commitment is there, both maybe not as strong by Congress at this point, but certainly within the administration. I think they recognize those problems. I know we complain here about our congestion, but you go to Houston and Dallas don't even think about those places because, it's just gridlock in Los Angeles. And
just look what Denton did with their light rail into Dallas to alleviate the problems on I-35. When I see that running, it's in the mornings or coming home, and it's packed. You can't hardly get on the thing.
Exactly. So, I would think there's a need for it. Well, anyway, so it's interesting, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know, Larry, we're just keeping you up here, but appreciate what you're doing, and I'm curious in the cost-benefit analysis. You mentioned Eugene, Oregon. I haven't had a chance to visit, but I'm to understand it's a great college town. Are we looking at, is that BCA going to be talking specifically about TOD as it pertains, like, if you have a permanent rail line, right, and that's a promise then in some ways, an investment to businesses, they can say, oh, okay, this route's not going anywhere. We have this rail in the ground, 12 inches deep, the streetcar one, for instance. That seems like a bit more of a safer investment in the minds of an entrepreneur, small business person, even a big corporation to say, we'll build along that. We're going to have eyeballs right there staring at it because it's always going to be there. How permanent are these lanes that we're talking about with BRT? Is the BCA going to be talking about that? What's Eugene look like in terms of the businesses that developed along those lines versus what we see on permanent streetcar and RTA commuter lines? That is a big question for me. And then, sorry, one more. Southwest side to the airport. Are we starting to have those conversations too? Because it just seems like a very logical conversation, the most logical conversation for people who are coming here and our own people who leave here to go on trips for business, pleasure, whatever.
Okay. I think one of the things you talked about was about permanence of rail versus bus, and another one about the airport. Those are two basic questions, right? Okay. Well,
Larry,
yeah.
I can take the airport one because we've done some
great.
recent work on that. But
Yeah. That's great. Okay. Good questions, but yeah.
Oh, this isn't criticism. These are genuine questions. I have questions. It says questions.
Oh, well, I want to answer. So we, consistent with the fixed guideway study, you'll see there was a line going out in the general direction of into serving the airport. But we've done some studies in-house I shouldn't say studies, we've evaluated some route options for serving the airport with an express type bus that would connect people from the airport to downtown in a pretty quick manner using I-40. So we have that route kind of designed and developed, and it's really just a operating funding issue for us at this point. But we feel like we basically have a solution in our in-house now to serve the airport, and that also supports the recommendations from the Nelson-Nygaard study, or the transit system analysis, where they said, one of those levels of implementation needs to include service to the airport. So we just continue to work our plan, and it's on the list, and we feel like we have a good solution.
So that's something that people filling out this current GeoBond survey, for instance, is that a funding possibility to go there, or are we looking for federal grants?
Well, part of it is in that our initial GeoBond list does have a request for additional buses for fleet expansion, to put an additional bus out. So it would help promote that part of the project, but it would not, the GeoBond process would not cover any of the operating costs. And that's really our biggest challenge right now for putting the service out there.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, if I can just throw a comment out there, James, to your question as far as permanency, I think the proposed route, the initial one, Classen to Northwest Expressway, I just can't see that, if it was ever implemented, ever being taken away, assuming, there was sufficient ridership. So I would say that one has the chance for being considered as permanent as any potential route. Now, the others, there's some question, but just the heavy traffic that you see, it just makes that an ideal candidate. And Larry, I think it's Cleveland that has seen development occur along their BRT, and it's, not as permanent as rail, but the commercial side in Cleveland has says, hey, to us, it's permanent enough. We're going to make that commitment, especially around areas where they have the stops at. You see development taking hold already. So I would bet that route for sure, in my mind, would be permanent, assuming we had any good response at all from the public. And the others, I guess it would just be a question at this point.
All right. Our last program report is our Marketing, Customer Relations, and Technology report. Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Appreciate the opportunity to share with you a few things that are going on in our division. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the marketing channels we'll be using over the course of this next year to share our story. Megan and I have one of the best jobs here, I think, because we do get to do just that. And in front of you is a collection of marketing icons with each of our major service lines. So let's take a look at the bus and ferry transit, and you can see that we focus on community engagement and events, media relations and news releases, e-newsletters, TV and radio, social media, and researcher surveys. As a best practice, we must go to our audiences where they are. We want to engage them in a variety of ways, and I think you'll see that represented here. And as you're aware, we do not have the marketing budget of Google or Apple to focus heavily on mass media, such as TV. However, with some strategically placed TV spots, combined with these other channels, we're able to expand our reach, which is getting in front of as many people as possible, while at the same time maximizing our budget. So, for example, this last year was the first time we committed our ferry marketing budget primarily to TV and then social media. Our spots centered around the Discover Oklahoma show, and we were able to reach 68,000 viewers each week, or 1.2 million viewers for the season that we had last year. With HMS and their efforts with social media, Ferry reported record ridership for 2016, so we expect to be doing that same type of program this year, hopefully seeing even greater results in this coming season. And similarly, we are working to boost awareness of Embark's parking options. Through purposeful search engine optimization and stronger social media presence, we are already, when you search for Thunder parking or downtown parking, we've captured those keywords, and our website is presented before any other of the parking options. So we're doing some things, subtle things like that to help improve the awareness and make sure that people are putting their eyes on us. And then this year going forward, we continue to plan to focus on our services and our programs, our technologies, offerings that we have through these channels of marketing. One thing that you're already aware of is one of our newest programs is the pilot of the Hall Pass program, where we're offering free transit to juniors and seniors through this existing program. Since the pilot was approved, our staff has made contact with 13 high schools in this Oklahoma City Public School District. We have visited we've visited 10 of those, and we have one this afternoon, so that'll make it 11, and have presented to over 1,000 students, probably close to 1,500, over the last 45 days. My staff has taken nearly 600 pictures and entered the same number in a database, processed those, and then turned around and printed just as many IDs. This program has been a labor-intensive project for sure, and definitely a team effort. And for example, we're very grateful for Kevin's operations team. They've been able to make deliveries of the IDs and passes as they are completed, and that's allowed us to remain focused on processing those pictures and applications and continuing to get them done and those passes in those students' hands as quickly as possible. And as we look forward, we have heard that you may be asked by the schools to expand that program to all high school grades. And we'll be coming back to you in the coming months with the pilot program's results, and we will likely bring you a recommendation and ask for you to help us decide how do we proceed after this 6-month trial. I can tell you that this has been a very humbling experience, and I think Megan would agree. From the stories that we hear, this is a definite hand up to these students. So it's been very worthwhile, even though the labor has been there. I'm very proud to be a part of it. Last summer, you heard from our lead research firm, ETC Institute, on the results of our rider and non-rider research for fiscal year 16. Since then, the fiscal year 17 research has been completed in addition to a downtown commuter survey, and that's what you're seeing a few of those stats here, and I'll just talk to you quickly about those. This research is focused on learning more about the travel patterns of people who come in and out of downtown. That's going to speak to some of the things that I think you were interested in with BRT, and understanding how they're traveling as well as when they're traveling will help us plan better and provide better services to our audiences. This is important because this is a market we already serve pretty well. We have almost all of our bus routes pulse in and out of the heart of our city. And so this is very valuable information as we craft our messaging and try to appeal to commuters, as well as dispel the myths of why people don't use transit, such as, well, what if I need to run errands? Well, we have 64% saying they make no stops to and from work on their commute as a general rule. Or that transit doesn't run at the times I need it to. Well, we have 68% that said they travel between 7 and 9 a.m. in the mornings for sure, and it was very similar in the afternoon as well. So there's a lot of consistency there, and so we'll definitely be using that to incorporate into our messaging. And while 90% of those respondents traveling alone, we know that we provide a more efficient and economical transit solution than to having a single car out there by themselves, a single occupant car out there. So over the next couple of months, we'll also be kicking off our Hispanic survey. We have been working with the ETC and partnered with a local Hispanic group, a public engagement firm, to conduct focus groups that will help us better understand that market. We'll learn their perspective and strengths and weaknesses, and we'll also be able to look at our past research where ETC has told us this is a very underrepresented audience. And we'll also be conducting some follow-ups focus groups for our commuter survey and the rider and non-rider survey work that we've already done. And this will allow us to dig a little deeper and understand what those perceived obstacles are that prevent residents from choosing transit first. Here you're looking at, there we are. A few pictures from the GeoBond meetings that we've been attending. The city has conducted 8 of those. Each workshop was hosted in a city council member's respective ward. And the great thing here is we were able to hear, a lot of ideas from the community on how, what they see as the state of transit in Oklahoma City. We definitely have our view of what it is, and they, and in a lot of ways confirmed very much what we already know. And so it's very validating in a sense, but it also allowed us to hear some things where when we thought we really had that covered, maybe we still have a little work to do. And so that gives us some direction as well. And the workshops were a great opportunity to connect with our community and share about our transit projects, but also allowed us to tell them about your vision for our agency going forward and the work that we have to do. So those initiatives were great talking points for us as we talk about the future of our organization. And from the connections we made here at this, we were able to, we were actually invited to come out to some HOA meetings, and we were able to do that. And again, I want to thank Kevin and his team and Dennis and his team for, getting a bus ready and putting all that together so that we could have a bus and an operator at that event. I can't tell you how much more impactful that makes it when you go to an event than just to have a talking head up in front of them with just pictures. You always hear, I remember when the last time I rode a bus, I was with my grandmother, and it was in the 1950s, or it was in the 60s when I was with my single mom who didn't have a car, and she dropped me off at school, and then I went to work. She went to work. So there's a lot of great stories, and allowed people to reminisce, and it allowed them to compare what the vehicles were like then and compared to now. And they're like, well, does it have air conditioning? Yeah. We've got air conditioning, we've got Wi-Fi, we can now plug in your phone so you can charge it. So, it's just this, it's so much nicer than what I thought it was. And so that's part of dispelling some of those myths that only we can do when we're in front of them and have that interaction and engagement. And then, this is one of the areas that we know from our research and through our engagement with our residents that implementing modern transit technologies such as interactive transit information along routes or stops and mobile fare payment is important to our audiences. That's both the non-riders and riders alike. So we know we've got to continue and maintain a focus here. So staff is currently exploring these options and how they would fit into our service offerings. And we believe that these will be critical tools for us to use in enticing future ridership to our entire system, but especially the upcoming streetcar. Again, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this morning and share with you what's been going on in our division, and be glad to answer any questions you might have.
I had a question on the Hall Pass program. You say you've reached out to 10 high schools and have 579 students already enrolled?
Correct.
And they're able to
That's
make out their
just-
passes, and have we seen any ridership increases in the bus stops around the schools, or
Right.
the capacity, or any issues there?
Well, it's still pretty early for us to gauge ridership yet, because, as we get them into their hands, we get it into the school's hands, and we're not really sure how quickly they get them handed out. So there's going to be kind of this trickle effect, I think, with that. But we will definitely start bringing those to you, I would say, in the very near future. We'll start looking at just that ridership usage as all those passes get distributed and see what the activation is like. And keep in mind, again, this is just juniors and seniors.
And how many students potentially were there at those 10 schools? Are we at 50% are signing up, or do you have a sense?
I couldn't answer that accurately, but I do know, for example, Capitol Hill, when we went there, we had approximately 500 just in our audience, but we had a very small number actually sign up. And then when I went to Star Spencer, that was one of the first schools, they had almost 100% sign-up ratio. So, and they have some of the, they have more difficult bus route to try to get in anywhere with, because it's limited out there at Spencer. So it's, it's really changing, what we have perceived are our needs. And we also think that there's just still some stigma that people think about riding the bus that we're going to have help overcoming, because these other students are using it, and they're going to be able to speak, by word of mouth, how much more independence they have. So we really expect that to grow. And we've even seen some trickle in since, just where they're emailing that information in.
Just to add to your question about the ridership, we as staff, we're really anxious too to see, okay, how often are these passes being utilized? But thinking about the timing, we really started getting out to those schools in January. As Michael said, he's still meeting with some, and then delivering the passes in February. So we really haven't had that, that good full month worth of kickoff to really look. But we're anxious to see what the ridership is, and we'll report just as soon as we have something to share with the trustees.
So you talked about doing a 6-month report. Is that going to be after we feel like we've got basically full implementation, and then give it 6 months after that? Or are we just going to go 6 months after the date that we started, initiated the program?
Yeah, at this point, we're looking at 6 months after we initiated the program. So really, around the end of this fiscal year, June, July, this summer we'll be coming back with kind of a report and analysis of what we found. Unless the trustees have different direction for us.
So they're given a hall pass to use, and it's got an expiration date of June 30th or something?
June 30th, yes.
June 30th, okay.
As someone in the Oklahoma City Public School District, I want to commend Embark using a limited staff, as you were pointing out, to go do this work. Our students really need this. Sometimes our buses get to school late, and then our students get to school late, and then their whole day is thrown off. They'll tell me this. They can't focus now. They're somewhere else. And if 90% of our students are on free and reduced lunch in the district, and that means we have a lot of families who might not have a car, or might just be relying on the one car. So I would imagine some of the stories are as humbling as you've said, but you're doing such a great service, and I just want to commend you all on doing that service with such limited staff and budget, and an era of budget cuts for both our district and for our city. So it really means a lot to our people. So thank you.
It's our honor.
Michael, with the varying results of the percentage of students signing up, it sounds like, for example, perhaps there was a better effort at Star Spencer in educating the students as to what this was all about and encouraging them than may occur at some of the other schools. So maybe some feedback back to the schools themselves, the school district, to see if they have any thoughts as to why some schools had high percentages, especially when you take into account Capitol Hill would have access to more than one route within a relatively short distance. Right. Certainly 36 to 29 is not that far, and certainly Walker, and then Western. So maybe there's just some things the schools could do better or do differently.
Right, and we're willing, we've been very open to partnering with them. We provided letters that they can send out to the parents, and we also provided it in Spanish as well, so they wouldn't have to worry about that, and they could just move it right onto their letterhead. You know, and I want to be sensitive, though, to the amount of things that administrators at schools and the teachers have to communicate. We're one of many, I can't imagine how many they have, that they're obligated to put out there. But we're not discouraged by that. That just gives us, you know, the opportunity to work more closely with them and just put as much effort into it as possible, and we're happy to do that.
And to build on that, what the councilman and what Michael are saying, and to the earlier point of, you know, well, does June 30th make the most sense? So you all are doing a wonderful job right now in implementing this. But to Michael's point, we have administrators who have, you know, 1,001 things on their plate, and part of me can't help but wonder, again, while you all have done an amazing, fantastic, commendable job, what happens if we look at the results going into the beginning of the school year, right? If this was something that we implemented halfway through a school year where most administrators in our district are focused on the tests that are coming up in April, and the attendance rate of our students to make sure they're prepared for those tests in April. Like, that's the tunnel vision of my principal right now, right? I guess I would say, let's not, if the results don't come back so beautiful for us in terms of like, oh, it's this great ridership, let's not be discouraged, because some of this might be better implemented at the beginning of a school year, fresh start, right? And we're able to say, hey, schools, as your students are here, here's how you can educate your families on how to get your kids to our school in addition to the school buses. So just something to kind of think about here as we go forward, that while we've done the best we can at this moment, we would have and will have another opportunity at the beginning of the 2017-2018 school year, and we really need to think about that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks all the trustees for their participation in our program reports. So I'm confident there won't be many items from the trustees as we call the meeting, but I will give a chance if any of the trustees have any final comments. Okay?
I haven't said anything before, so I'm listening now. I've been on this board for, well, almost as long as Chris, but not quite. But I've seen a lot of the studies that have come and gone, and a lot of them have, you know, come back again. But I think we're sitting now where people get so excited about streetcars that that's going to make all of these other programs come forward and happen that we've been waiting to happen. And I could really commend Michael and his staff, because your brain never quits working. You know, you get started in one thing and then he's already jumping to something else to start. Just that was all my comment was.
All right. Thank you, Kay. David, Arnie?
I would move to receive the program reports.
Well, I was going to get there, so thank you. Okay. Do I hear a motion to receive the program reports? She did. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay. Craig? Jason? It's a first. It's a first. All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.